particularly interest me.
What would you say, Elie?
I love that for the idea of the secret feelings. I agree. I've tried in the West, in the United States, going to the church, going to the synagogue, going to the pagan festivals, going to the rites at the OTO, all of which I think have been lovely in their own way. But you just know when you go and experience certain things, they are either right for you or not. I am private. I do particularly like things that you would go do and not talk about too much.
I don't know. So I don't think, not to interrupt you, Elie, I did get a message just now, I want to put it out there. I think we're having streaming issues with YouTube. Somebody mentioned it in the comments too, and I just got a message as well. We are still available on some of the Facebook profiles, and I think it is available for some YouTube users because we do have comments coming through on YouTube. So I apologize if you're having some streaming issues.
Oh, so we are having comments come through on YouTube?
We have one right now from Liz. But yeah, I think it's just an in and out. If you're having that issue, look us up on Facebook.
I don't know.
Okay, Facebook, yeah, somebody said the Facebook one. I think it's a streaming issue.
Unfortunately, once in a while, living in the third world country known as New Orleans, no matter what we get, we've got problems. We haven't had the show for a while. The people who are in charge of the technical stuff of it, I don't know the answers because I don't have access to them at the moment. So we'll find out.
We'll do our best.
I'll tell you what, I love nothing more than 2 hours of my time being wasted. So
we do have comments coming through though. It's not wasted. I see your comments. Thank you for joining us.
Well, if it doesn't air on YouTube, we'll have to do it again.
And I love our private.
But it could be he's just having problems getting it.
Yeah.
I love our private coven work. It's the strongest thing possible. Just you and your very core group of magical people show up in your dedicated temple space where you have power stored, and you put your minds to something you need to accomplish. There's nothing better.
It's wonderful when witches of multiple covens can come together for a grand sabbat, and we can come together and charge the tradition and encourage each other and get that feeling of there's more of us. You're like me. I'm in this bigger thing than just this one little group. It's a wonderful feeling. And then everyone should go home and get about their business.
I kind of love that.
You know,
thanks for coming. You got to go home.
I absolutely believe it. And I've thought about it, and Levi knows this. I don't know if Elie does, but I've had my moments in the sun of thinking, witchcraft should really just move forward and be this big thing, and that's the exuberance of youth. Now that I think that I'm just a little bit older, I think that would be really bad. I think if the craft ever becomes like organised religion, it won't be the craft anymore.
I agree. No,
and the real witches will call themselves something else and be doing what they've been doing for hundreds of years, thousands of years.
There's an analogy I think we could use from music, right? Many of you will be familiar with the band The Velvet Underground. They were sort of a seminal rock band in many ways, but they were not wildly popular, right? But there is a famous saying, and I can't remember if it was a music critic or someone else who said it, that only 100 people bought their first album, but everyone who bought that album started a band, right? And I sometimes feel that way about witchcraft. Is like the original initiators of the witchcraft revival had small organizations, and yet look at the enormous impact.
Every single one of them started a coven.
But the enormous impact that the witchcraft revival had on contemporary spirituality.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just huge.
And still
the
does.
goddess movement.
Still does.
And still does.
It's growing every day.
And those people trace themselves back to that initial magic that came from the sort of renewers of craft, our elders. And so that does matter.
And the silent secret society of our elders, too.
Goddess. Brian wants to call so bad. We do have another question. So Alan asked, what secret society...
I don't know the phones work.
It's still running. What secret society do you believe has influenced traditional craft the most? So, what
can't
secret
answer that question without having a clarification of what you mean by traditional craft. Because there's what some people say it means, and there's what I think it means. Yes, I'm not sure. So there's the idea of traditional craft meaning pre-Gardnerian stuff. There's an idea that traditional craft means anything from England that's not Gardnerian Alexandrian. There's the idea that traditional craft means any tradition within witchcraft. There's my idea of traditional craft, which is Alexandrian Gardnerian witchcraft. But all these labels are used, so I'm not quite sure what you mean.
My assumption would be that he means BTW, Gardnerian and Alexandrian.
That's what I thought too, but I'd rather him clarify before I answer the question.
Fair
We
point.
can do that pretty easy. Or before we answer the question.
So while we're waiting for that clarification, someone said, well, when you use the word traditional, what do you mean?
Well, to me, traditional and how it was originally taught, because the way it's being used within the last 10 years is not how it was used when I came into the craft. And the fad around it, like Robert Cochrane's stuff was not called traditional witchcraft when I got into things. It's what it's called now, and it's done by people that have nothing to do with him, really. Traditional witchcraft to me was originally introduced, meaning you're from a tradition of witchcraft, and you're a traditional witch versus an eclectic witch. That's how it was first put. To me, traditional witchcraft means, obviously Gardnerian and Alexandrian, but you could be, in any tradition and kind of be
Buckland,
traditional.
I would have
right?
put Buckland in that group, probably.
Buckland's
Or fairy,
Gardnerian, darling.
I know a fairy tradition too.
Well, it depends on which fairy tradition,
Yeah.
but yeah. There's like literally 3 different traditions called fairy, and I get
But
confused.
still, as a younger person, I thought, years ago studying witchcraft, I thought those were the core groups. Those were the older traditions.
Depending on what books you read when you were doing it to establish those sort of definitions. The problem is within craft and paganism, definitions and labels literally change every 10 years.
Yeah.
And I don't subscribe to the change. I try to keep up with them so that I understand what people mean. I'm not so interested in policing what labels people use as to trying to figure out what language they're speaking and explaining what language I'm speaking so that we can have proper communication.
It's much clearer.
So, in my lucid head, I would say traditional craft is anything within a tradition. However, I do tend to think of traditional craft as being Gardnerian and Alexandrian. Because in my opinion, everything else was copycats of
So Alan did clarify and said he did mean initiatory, sort of BTW. So I think that is a good question for all 3 of us. What secret societies, quote unquote, influenced Gardnerian and Alexandrian initiatory craft?
Well, I'll start with the first one, the New Forest Coven.
I was going to say Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Yeah, the OTO on some level.
The OTO.
Masonry. Gardner was a Mason. I would say that you do have influences of Freemasonry in traditional
Rosicrucian.
Yeah, the various Rosicrucian
Masonic.
orders, because there was a Rosicrucian theatre very close to the New Forest that Gardner was
Possibly a
involved with.
folklorist society in England. There's tons of stuff that obviously influenced, and part of the reason for that is because Gardner was initiated into several things. He was a member of the Order of the Druids, the ancient Order of the Druids.
Yeah.
He was an initiated of the OTO. He was in some loose form of Rosicrucian, at least through exposure.
Folklore Society.
He was a
Folklore
Mason.
Society.
So he was influenced by all of these things and initiated, but his claim to witchcraft was that he was initiated into the New Forest Coven. And unless you were in that coven, you don't really know what they gave him. And none of us do.
Yep, correct. But I would say those are all the societies that I would say had a large
That we know
influence.
about.
Yeah, that we know about.
Right.
That had a very large influence. I would say you could expand this if you really wanted to get into sort of like who was directing the narrative at this time. I think you would have to bring up things like the Theosophical Society and the various orders of Dion
The
Fortune.
Woodsmen, the Boy Scouts.
You're going to have to bring
What
all
was
that.
the name of that Boy Scout thing in the New Forest?
The Scouting
Woodcut
Organization.
Chivalry.
That there was.
So there was an
something out there.
organization
There
in
was
the New
something.
Forest called the
Yeah.
Woodcut Chivalry,
Yeah,
which
yes.
is very interesting. What's his name? Triumph of the Moon writes about it.
Ronald Hutton.
These are influences, but going back to the whole secret society thing, though, we can all do the same thing so many brilliant writers have done, which as a not so brilliant writer, I try to avoid. Dissecting what we know about history and making a new truth. It's fun to do. We love it, don't we? But the truth of the matter is, unless you've been initiated into a Masonic lodge as a 3rd degree Master Mason, you don't know what it means.
Correct.
I don't care how many books you've read or what you think you know or what you think you know about it. And I don't either. And I know a lot about it, but I've never done it.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
So we don't know. No witch on earth knows what was in the New Forest Coven. You have to decide whether you believe there was one or there wasn't. And it's totally fine to have your opinions, but we're all speculating.
Yeah.
And I have my speculations, of course I do. But they're my speculations. I wasn't in it. I believe he was initiated into witchcraft. I don't know what it looked like.
I don't think it's...
And I don't know where it came from.
I don't think it's necessarily useful to unpick it, right?
But we try so hard, don't we? Yeah.
I believe he was initiated into witchcraft, and I think other people were around a bit too. Probably not a lot, but a bit.
Well, the ideas about witchcraft and the ideas about witchcraft being an initiatory secret cult far predate God.
Yes.
Yep.
And, you know, we can only guess. You know, it's not a far stretch of the imagination to see all of the cult societies that were coming up in England and to imagine something predated Gardner we don't know much about. It's not really that hard to imagine because it was a secret society. People didn't want to be known in the 30s and 40s as witches. That would have been
lose your job.
Suicide.
Yeah, cultural
Not
suicide.
either in the late 1800s.
No.
That all would have camouflaged themselves under herbalism or folklore or history society.
Or other
art.
occult societies.
Right.
You know,
And the Rosicrucian Theater, I mean, I just think they were all prudent. We have much more freedom today than they did.
We do. I also think it's important to recognize one thing that we're not talking about here is this concept that the occult orders of the occult revival in the early 20th century in the UK, almost entirely, right? You know, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is in the UK, the Theosophical Society, until it moves to India, their largest organization is in London. You know, these were modern movements. But I think sometimes we're forgetting that throughout the history of major world religions, there has always been a certain concept of initiation or secret societies. I mean, this is Tantra in Hinduism. This is the secret Taoist worship societies that existed in China to practice what, you know, internal
most
alchemy.
people don't realize
It's
at
a
one
thing.
point in time Reiki was a secret initiative.
Yes,
Oh,
that's
it's,
right.
yeah, it's a
That's
big
right.
deal.
It's not the Reiki of the lady your mom knew. It's
No.
something completely different.
And also,
You're right.
there's something we have to address in the comments because you'll love it. But I do want to say one last thing before we
309 Goddess. If you guys don't call, we're going to just...
Brian's going to have a
turn the phones
moment.
off. I'm not convinced the phone works.
It is, I
YouTube doesn't
promise.
work. Why should I believe the phone
The
works?
phone works, I promise.
Who
It was
works
tested.
here?
It was tested. I do want to say one final thing before moving on from that point, which is, I mentioned Tantra, I mentioned the Taoist and whatnot, but this used to be, and people don't really know this, a Christian thing. You know, and in the Orthodox churches for a long time, and before the Great Split, there were two masses. There was the Mass of the Catechumen and the Mass of the Faithful. The Mass of the Catechumen was open to potential converts, and this was before the Eucharist. Right before the consecration of the Eucharist, everyone who was not a baptized Christian was asked to leave, and they couldn't come back in until the mystery, the mystus, was done.
Wow.
And that was called the Mass of the Faithful, and only baptized Christians in good standing with the church were allowed to participate.
Which
So-
included drinking blood.
But that's
The
why
blood
I
of
always
God,
sit in the
right.
back of any church.
They could just let anyone see them
Certainly,
drinking
and
the
I have
blood
to go
of
out
God.
the door at some point, yes.
So
Yes, but fair point. Christianity started out as mystery cult.
very much so. So there is a question I think you would love to answer in the comments about Alex and Alex Sanders and the foundation of Alexandrian Craft. Someone is asking about the story in King of the Witches where Alex says that he was initiated into the craft by his grandmother during the Blitz in World War II.
It's a very long story, you know. So Alex Sanders was undoubtedly, well, what we know about him is that he was in, for facts, basically, based on things that we have documentation of. We know he was in a few covens, right? We know the first coven he ran himself was in Manchester, but before that he was in probably 3 other covens. 2 for sure. One was in Derbyshire and one was in Nottingham. I also believe he was probably in the Sheffield coven, but I'm not going to split hairs about that. I wasn't there. But he absolutely had a woman he was working with who was in the Sheffield coven. He had at least gone to visit the Sheffield coven. He absolutely has one of his first photographs. He's got paintings from Arnold Crowther in his very first public photograph. And then somehow the former maiden of the Sheffield coven ended up being in his coven. And, you know, he's got the Book of Shadows. And there's this big mystery around how he got the Book of Shadows. But we all know for a fact that Pat Kapensky was in his coven. I always say her name differently because who knows.
It's Polish.
But... Most people believe he was initiated into what we would now call Gardnerian witchcraft. Now, from what I have been told, both orally and what I have read in Firechild by Maxine Sanders and other books, this story of him being initiated by his grandmother came out when the Gardnerians were very much persecuting him, and he was actually on an interview. So I think it came out before June Johns, and the initiates he was working with at the time had never heard the story before. And he was the naughty occultist, and they went up to him, they said afterwards, why did you tell that story? And he said, well, I couldn't really tell them the truth, could I? So back then it was quite normal to not tell the general public what was going on within the secret society of witchcraft. So he created a fanciful story. However, I wasn't there. Could Alex have been initiated by his grandmother? Maybe that all happened. But I do know that he worked with witchcraft outside of anything within his family. And I do know that Alexandrian witchcraft, our Book of Shadows, and our rituals comes from Gardnerian witchcraft. Mm-hmm. So it's basically point blank that he was either completely trained in Gardnerian witchcraft and had the Book of Shadows without initiation, or in the 1950s and 60s he was initiated like any other witch at that time into witchcraft, which wasn't called Gardnerian witchcraft. Alex would have never called himself a Gardnerian witch, because in his day of the Manchester Coven, nobody was calling themselves a Gardnerian witch. Everyone was calling themselves a witch, and they were initiated into witchcraft. So, do I believe he was initiated by his grandmother? I don't think it matters if I do or not. That's where I would leave. With this tonight's topic, I'd rather avoid speculation and get back to, if you weren't there, you don't know. Once again, we can all come up with our opinions about whether he was or wasn't, or what was most likely, but I wasn't there, you weren't there. What I would say is, I don't follow Alexandrian witchcraft or a connection that I deem coming through his grandmother.
Agreed.
If that makes sense. So I believe that his lineage goes back to Gerald Gardner.
So to bring it back to that,
me too.
And I'll ask both of you this, and we can start with Elie, but we've talked a lot about secret societies, but what I don't think we've done so far that we need to is why? Why is it a good thing? Why is it something you would want to have as a spiritual practice, to have an organization that practices like ritual secrecy?
Right, that's what I was thinking about.
You have to know the secrets to know.
For early man, for safety, for security, for comfort.
That would be your main reasons?
Yeah, that's what I would think. Is that you would go into a group that could answer a few questions or do a handshake or had some sort of knowledge that instantly you could say, these are my people, we have the same language, we work on the same kind of projects.
Okay.
Fellowship, secrecy for a lot of reasons. I mean, in all kinds of fields. Anyone who is a specialist doesn't want to give away their deep knowledge to the novice, just because it might be dangerous.
Ellie's answer is power.
You're not wrong.
That is power. Unlimited power.
And
you don't know the power of the dark side.
So, yeah, I think that too. But I think it's part of human nature. I think it's part of human nature to keep certain things to yourself. I don't mind it.
What about you, Brian?
Well, funny enough,
I don't mind it.
I'm not going to name drop because it'd be too easy for me to do, but when I was in London for a book signing at one point in time, there was a very well-known priestess who was introducing me to other Alexandrians who were all people who knew Alex, and a lot of them were from the original covens. And I was, the American, contrary to popular belief, the American. And I kept being introduced to these witches who were all remarkable. They'd worked in the London Coven, or they'd worked in the Temple of the Mother. They'd all been around. And when I was introduced to them, the same thing was said every time. This is Brian Cain. He's from America. But he wants to know. Right? So once again, to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. So I suppose I did want to know. So my answer as to why I became initiated and why I pursue the path of initiation is because I still want to know.
I wanted to address one thing before I answer.
To know also.
Ian said a little joke in the comments, and Ian, I totally know you're joking because you've been on the show, you've commented on the show before. He said, I could tell you, but then I'd have to charge you dues. That's something very important I do want to highlight, though, is we're one of the few sacred societies that are forbidden for charging for teachings.
No, we just want your soul.
Yeah, that screed doesn't apply to us. We
Just your soul.
Yeah, the only thing mine
It
is
won't
just bring our
cost
food
much.
and wine and flowers.
Won't cost much, just
no
your
money,
voice.
just cheese.
Yeah, it won't cost much, just your voice. We don't have an Ursula button. How sinful.
We do have an Ursula.
But dues can only be paid in crystals and kisses. I don't like crystals.
Cheese, wine,
Flowers,
bread and
hummus.
butter.
I'll say this. I think I have a bigger answer than just it's useful, right? Or it's interesting. I think there's mystical power behind this concept. You know what I mean? Like, this is the same concept that's behind monogamy and love and whatnot. It's like this whole concept of like being closed off, separated, a boundary, right? You know, so many things that we make meaningful in our life.
Special.
What does the word sacred literally come from? Etymologically, it comes from set apart, right? To make different, right? So if your religion is something that you twist and mold and change to be popular, or you twist and mold and change to adapt constantly, and it doesn't ever actually set itself apart, how is it sacred? Like, it's not sacred, it's mundane. You know, the word mundane means of the world. Sacred means set apart, mundane means of the world. So I don't want to be mundane. You know, I don't want to have a religion that is kowtowing constantly to social nicety, or that is kowtowing constantly to sort of what needs to be said to make someone else feel good. I want a religious experience that leads to religious experiences. And I don't think, you know, and I think there is something to be said about the concept of a mystery, a secret, you know, that you have to go into something. And to go into something means there's a door, means there's a boundary, right? And I think that we're losing that when we forfeit ground immediately and say, well, there are no secrets anymore. Brian's right. That's a lie, first of all. It's just not true. And second of all, why would you want it to be true? Like, do you really want it to be true that there are no secrets, if there's no mystery?
Levi,
People don't want to take a risk. People don't want to take a risk.
Nobody wants to admit they're a sheep, but most people are, and that's okay. Just not us.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand why you
Witches
would
aren't
want
sheep.
to be, right?
Somebody has to be, Levi. Everyone could be a wolf. You know, but I suspect most people watching this show are not sheep.
No.
Or
So,
you watching the show.
But it's a path that not everyone runs across, you know.
Not everyone should be doing it. Not everyone's meant for the path of
organized
initiation.
religion, you know, there's certain kinds of philosophies. There's scientific guilds too. And
Who are you? Are you in the lion pride? Are you in the wolf pack?
Witchcraft.
Or are you in the buffalo herd?
But I squarely
Who are you?
put witchcraft into the secret society.
It is.
I think
Don't
so.
you? I do.
Absolutely.
But, you know,
Definitely.
banging, sorry. The public perception of witchcraft right now is
Specialized rituals,
This-
changing your state of being, working with God forms.
intention. Getting on TikTok, it's
Yeah,
all about
yeah.
how you identify, and we're all supposed to be one big hugging happy family. And I think the biggest problem I have with pagan communities I've experienced is they've always been very Borg-like to me. And once I reject wanting to be a part of them, because in any city, I've experienced this in any city I've run a coven. I don't know if there's a pagan group in Salem. I really hope there's not. But,
sure there is.
you know, probably not. They probably killed them years ago. Like, it is Salem. They probably couldn't live there. But they always get angry when they realize you don't want to be a part of it, which I don't understand. You know, it's not, I don't have anything against them. I'm just not interested. I wish them well. I just am not interested. Yeah.
This is also a lot of things in the comments. I'm seeing all these people agree and talk about like the concept of like not wanting to be a part of the herd, right? And I have to say, for me, it's not so much that some sort of antinomian thing, right? Of like wanting to be better or above or whatever. Like I don't really care. For me, it is more about how would I word this and not overblow it. To be honest, when I meet someone and they tell me that they're a witch, or they tell me they're pagan, or they tell me they're a magical practitioner, I'm always curious to find out whether or not they mean that in the sense of this is a path that is transforming them as a person, as an ensouled being, or whether they mean this is an aesthetic, right? And I'm not just talking about witchy
Can't it be
clothes.
both?
Right, it can be both, Brian, I promise. But,
Couple of sentences.
you know,
right?
they don't mean
pretty
it's
much figure
religious,
out.
right?
Yeah,
They don't really mean it.
No, I agree.
And I often am so disappointed because I'll give people the benefit of a doubt and I'll be like, oh, you know what, I don't want to be judgmental, I don't want to be so elitist. And I'll talk to them, and after 5 minutes, you could tell they don't really believe in any of it.
After 5 minutes, you begin judging and becoming an elitist.
You can't help it because you're like, oh, we're just... And it's not really even so much judgment, so much as we are just speaking a radically different language. Like,
as far as I'm concerned, witchcraft is an aristocracy. I've always thought so. I mean, and we're a part of the royal family, quite frankly.
The royal family.
We are the royal family of witchcraft.
Do I even have a button for this? I don't know. I don't think so. Which one?
I want to say that whenever I'm talking
Don't
to
have to be
anyone about
this
religion,
one.
Still the march. Look at Ellie's face.
Sorry.
okay. Whenever I'm talking to anyone about religion or philosophy, I always say to myself right away, Elie, go to where their brain is located.
Where do you
I'm
find
gonna need some clarification on that, Ellie.
Well, it just makes the conversation easier. I don't have to bridge the gap continually from their brain to my brain. I just go over there to their brain.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of saying with the
That's
labels.
exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
When we're in a program like this where I'm educating, I'm more willing to talk about that pathway. But in real life, I
Mostly-
just try to figure out what are you talking about.
Yes, right, and just be
Yeah.
very neutral because
Yes.
you really can't make much.
When somebody comes in and says, I'm a witch, but immediately you know they're talking about like they just collect something.
But how many times do people sit down with us and say, "Oh, I'm a spiritualist," and I talk to you're just thinking, "Oh my God."
So if somebody comes up to me in the store,
Right.
Which never
then I
happens.
yell, "John, get them away from me! What are you doing?"
Never happens.
If somebody did, or somebody comes up to me in whatever and says, "Oh, I'm a Christian witch," I'm not going to say, "No, you're not." I'm not going to say anything. On here, I'll say, "No, they're not," because I don't believe you could be a Christian witch, because witchcraft is a religion, and Christianity is a different religion, and they have opposing viewpoints.
That's
For
right.
instance, Christianity doesn't
I
have a
agree with that.
goddess.
I agree with that.
Witchcraft does. So that's just one of many opposing viewpoints. I'm going to be like side-eyeing all night long.
It's okay.
Uh,
You always
side by
are.
side,
But-
they're definitely different.
You're very close.
Exactly what Elie's saying. If somebody comes up saying that, I'm going to be like, okay, so you believe in Jesus and you want to work magic, but you don't want to go to hell. And that's the
That's a
only
lot of
information I need to have.
That's a lot of
You
people.
know?
But we can go there and have good
And
conversations.
I know what they'll never have, Ellie. Do you know what they'll never
They
have?
won't have our secret society. religion.
Well, that's fine. Big fan.
Sorry, the buttons.
The buttons. He's into the
But-
buttons tonight,
But
isn't
just
he?
like in readings, with clients, there's like 2 or 3 little key words or something where they're an insider. It's like,
Oh, yes.
with our style of witchcraft.
Or they
too.
should be insider, yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there begins that dance of feeling a little bit more comfortable or interested in what they have to say. So
Yeah.
I like that. It does happen.
Saying the video's cut in half. I don't know what that even
But
means.
a lot of times it's that we just stay on the outside and interact with it and stay in control of it, right?
Correct. And I also think that I keep going back to this, so I hope it's not sort of beating a dead horse, but it's very important to differentiate between people who come to this concept of witchcraft solely for what Brian is talking about and what he was talking about earlier, and Elie as well, which is operative magic, right? This idea that I want something to happen in the universe and I think that if I learn something, it'll happen. As opposed to this concept of transformation or ecstasy, right? Or a religious experience. We are also offering that, not offering it, but living within it.
I believe in operative witchcraft if a
Same.
witch is doing it.
Absolutely. But we also believe in the spiritual
If a
aspect
witch is
of
doing
it.
it.
And I think that is what separated a lot of people who did join secret societies, not just witchcraft, but also the various hermetic orders and the various occult orders, theosophical orders, is they decided this was going to be something more for them, something quite a bit more.
Do the work.
And they wanted to do work. They wanted this to transform their life, to transform their ethos, their self, their psyche. They wanted to do something. That's what the secret societies existed for. It wasn't so much this cloak and dagger sort of better than you nonsense. It was really like, okay, this is where we're going to keep the stuff that's transformative. The part that exists outside of these walls, that's fine too. Like if you're really into that, but it's not what we're doing.
And are there secret societies in Buddhism or Hinduism or even
Yeah, Tantra.
esoteric?
And they have a
and
priesthood,
esoteric
too.
Christianity,
Yeah, Tantra.
too. So if you want to be more operative, you can go into these groups.
Yeah.
Any major religion that has a priesthood, like traditional, like Catholicism or Buddhism or certain sects of Hinduism, we could be naive and think those priesthoods don't have secrets, but I assure you they do.
They absolutely do.
I assure you those monks have things they know that they do not
Yes.
teach other Buddhists.
Yeah. And, Joanne says in the comments, this knowledge, the knowledge that we're talking about, the transformative knowledge, is what separates you and defines you as a priest or a priestess and what separates you from the laity. And that's true. We don't have a laity.
Yeah, witchcraft doesn't have a laity.
Because everyone who's stepping into this society is taking on a mantle of priesthood, is taking on a much more serious role. We're not like other sort of so-called pagan religions or self-made
We are cloistered in that sense. I think nowadays the way that we serve humanity is through being ambassadors of magic and ambassadors of the goddess. I think that's my idea of it.
I would agree with that.
That's my idea of it.
No, I 100% agree. I do think I don't want it to sound like we're saying we have no voice whatsoever in the wider world.
No, and I think it's something. And as a witch, I know I have a voice, and Elie has a voice, and Levi has a voice, and we're more than willing to use it.
I think ambassadors for ritual also.
Yeah, for the power of ritual, the power of magic, the power of transformation. What we're not ambassadors for is this idea that none of those things matter and it's really just about what you feel. Right? That's fine too. When you believe in that on some level, there is a concept of sort of your own psychological reality matters, very much so.
Magical narcissism is not fertile.
That's a good way of putting it.
But we're also not chaos magic in that we have a real set standard of philosophy about bringing forth life, interaction in the universe, how things come about, how we interact with energy.
And I'm going to be very careful about what I'm about to say.
And the God forms.
Because it is stepping on some... I don't want to step on things that we do hold sacred and that we do keep secret. But I will say this. Part of the entire reason that you are so careful about who you bring into your circle is because wouldn't it be lovely if you could create a space on this earth where you could truly be yourself? Where you didn't have to keep secrets, where you were allowed to be free in body, mind, and spirit. And now imagine how hard that is to create with other people. And so imagine how picky you're going to have to be. Imagine how specific you're going to have to be. Imagine how unified you're going to have to be to get to that place. One of the reasons I find the circle so magical and so powerful is because it truly exists between the worlds. In that moment, if it's done correctly, in that moment, I don't have to worry about any details.
Do this is why I do not initiate the ugly.
Perfect love and perfect.
These things must be done delicately.
This is why Brian does not initiate the spiritually ugly. That's fine.
I didn't say anything about spiritual.
I'm trying to soften Brian by making it about something besides
But-
the
It's
body.
just that plain old.
It may be interpreted as you will.
Yes. And also, like, Bloodborne's bringing up, public ritual can be fun. Yeah, we have them. I mean, Brian...
I also
literally
just called both of you pretty, didn't I?
You did, in your own way. Brian literally just promoted public rituals that we do, in Salem and New Orleans. So it's not that we're
I
against them.
detest public rituals. I had to create some myself to stomach the process. But I do like... What I love is when you can get the public to connect.
We're having really nice public rituals.
Yes. Because
He should be praising.
well, I'm trying to, but you're interrupting me. So the thing that I came to appreciate in my work that Elie's talking about is that the very first one we had here, I think, Levi, you were here for it.
I think so, yeah.
And the goddess came through, and the people responded to her. And that kept happening, and the magic comes through. And so that I do love. But I think it's because we're like... That's an objective we have. We want people to feel the goddess, and we want people to feel the power.
And this is a dedicated temple.
Yes.
Even though it's in our shop, it's
that's
a dedicated temple.
all we're trying to achieve with these things.
Yeah.
The seasonal side is just good fun. I mean, in my mind, what we call modern paganism in the UK used to be your village may have a May festival every year that has been going on for 100, 200 years, and it may have evolved, but maybe somebody gets dressed up as the Green Man and goes parading around. These things still happen. So when witchcraft started coming out, people started getting involved in those things and then putting more meaning behind them than maybe their great-grandparents did, because they did come from pre-Christian customs. And so that's how it sort of evolves. It's very different. When people call themselves pagan in the UK, it means something very different than what it does in the United States.
I'm guessing it's changing.
Because they've had, probably because the Americans influence, we influence them more than we should. I don't think America should have any influence over British craft. I think British craft should turn off the ear, really. If I'm not offending them, I'm happy. But we are, because America influences everything. So, sorry.
This is
What
true.
were you going to say?
We
Ella?
don't call these public rituals pagan rituals.
No.
We say they are specific
Occult rituals.
witchcraft, occult Sabbaths, and we do not call them pagan.
No.
And they are nothing resembling.
No, other than the fact that, ISIS is pre-Christian.
And also, there's no way, and this is something I had to give up myself, is like there's no way to talk about these things where people are not going to get sort of like, well, don't you think you're saying that this... No, I'm not diminishing. What I'm
If
saying is
we worried
foreign to
about...
me.
I'm being very long-winded today, sorry, I'm going to shut up.
Fine.
If we worried about offending people, we'd never say anything at all.
Yes, and it's also just like, I'm not trying to be rude when I say I just don't care about any of this. The reason I say it is because it is foreign to me. I don't understand what it means to just sort of play paganism, you know what I mean, or be a play witch. Like, it would be as offensive to me as if you were a devout Christian and somebody sort of just pretended to like Jesus for a day.
Which happens.
Which happens a lot, you know, and they're a sort of Christmas, Easter Christian or whatever.
If you watch South Park, you know about this.
It's just not my thing, and so I feel sort of not, like I said, there's no judgment necessarily. It's just, I just don't understand where we're going to have any meeting ground, right?
Christian used to point out, Christian Day, my husband, used to point out to me that if we wanted to be the witches that switched, we could make billions. If we
if you became a
Christian,
Christian,
wanted to convert and just be
100%.
like, we're not gay anymore, we're just friends now, we're here for Jesus. Put on those white suits, get on, you already got the Tammy Faye thing going. We could make so much money.
And not to interrupt, but Roxy made a great point in the comments that public rituals, sometimes someone's on a journey toward initiation in whatever path they're following and things that we would value. But it's going to take some time, because it does. And so those public rituals can sometimes be a taste of something. And I absolutely agree with that. I do think that sometimes public ritual or rituals that you participate, like we do at Hexfest or like we do here or like I've seen other groups
They can
do,
be magical.
they are a way to sort of find the people who are going to go deeper.
What I
You'll
don't
see
want
them.
it to be as a crutch for people who want to show up to something they think they're included in.
You know what? I don't think that way at all. When I look at the people who come to things that I'm around, I know that they are sincerely looking for some high quality.
Some of them, yeah.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
They come in, it's brief, they're not presumptuous, they're not talking about themselves, they're thankful, they come in, they do the work.
Yeah, we've had sincere people here.
Absolutely. That's where you do find people. So I
Here,
think even a
yes,
secret
Yes,
society
but
has a public
I
face.
still like to offer that up, because I found through working at Hex and through the public rituals we've been a part of over the years, different kinds too, not just in the shop.
I will say Salem's been a bit more of a
Hecate
mix of
ritual
chips
in
there.
November. There's been a few things.
You're going to have to stop whispering, darling.
The Hexfest ritual.
Ellie does this very British sort of mumble that falls back into itself.
I'm not mumbling. So
I could hear.
So I think there are sincere people that we'd like to offer that up.
Yeah, and people are talking, in the comments about rituals they've participated in, either at Hexfest or elsewhere, where that was a part of the journey to the society, right? And so, yes, they do serve a purpose, right? But they're not the whole thing. And that's, I think, where...
When I say I
the line
detest
is.
public ritual, it's because...
But they're still authentic.
Well, I think we've made them authentic. And for myself personally...
If good people are doing them,
Yes.
they're authentic.
But I was exposed to them when I was very young. And so I've seen a lot of bad things, as have you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have somewhere seen bad rituals. So I've strived really hard to do my best to make them not bad. I detest public rituals, but I will say I have enjoyed many of ours, and that's probably because there's initiates there, and Elie is right. In New Orleans, we've had a lot of sincere people come through, and that was a lesson for me, to see the sincerity of these people who really wanted to worship the goddess. I think in Salem, we've had a few looky-loos, but that's Salem. But we've also had some very, very sincere people come in Salem as well.
So to take it back for a sec, because we've gotten very specific, but the original topic, this concept of the secret society, right, of witchcraft, right? And we've talked about sort of being a secret
The
society.
secret name of the goddess is the Metatron.
Well, I guess we're done now.
Just kidding.
I guess it's all over now.
Just kidding.
Everyone knows.
I just ruined witchcraft. Sorry.
You did. You absolutely destroyed it. But we are part of a lineage, I think, it's important to state, that witchcraft was revived at a time where there were a lot of secret societies. You know, there were a lot of occult revival societies and whatnot. I find it very interesting.
There still are.
Exactly, but I find
It's
it
not
interesting.
just witchcraft.
Which thrives
I know you
and
know
lives,
this, but yeah.
and which doesn't. Right? You know, which ones have that spark
Power.
and which don't. Right? You know, who's got the power, who's got the real connection. But, I mean, we are talking about all of Dion Fortune stuff.
This coven doesn't need a new supreme. Needs a new rug.
I knew the rug line was coming. But it comes from that same line. So, you know, Elie has experience in some of these organizations as well. But I do think it's interesting to talk about the soup in which it was created, right? The
They're
Hermetic
side by
Order of the
side.
Golden Dawn
They're
and the
side by
OTO.
side.
Yeah.
And
Helen, would you
witchcraft.
mind speaking a bit about that? Your experiences as a secret occultist as well.
Well, I wasn't
Because
a secret
we've never
occultist.
been secret occultists.
You've always been public occultists.
Well, we were never.
I was a Christian.
We were never I was never initiated into anything but witchcraft. So you have that experience. I don't have it.
My parents were educated to the point that they decided not to take me and my brother into any particular religions. So I'm not baptized, and I am not.
She's a
I'm not brought into.
I wasn't
a particular
baptized
religion.
either.
In the late 1990s, I started seeking out some sort of teaching on Western mystery traditions, symbolism, Kabbalah, Hermetic philosophy.
Yep.
And I discovered some schools that came out of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, including Builders of the Aditum, BOTA,
Yep.
Servants of the Light, SOL. There was stuff with the Arthurian legend work, like Caitlin and something Matthews, John Matthews.
Right.
And so I reached out to Servants of the Light and became one of their students, which was possible to do a long distance through correspondence work, and then also going to workshops and ritual lodge teachings and work, which I did go to in Atlanta. And so I would say that I'm taught Western mystery tradition, Kabbalah, Hermetic philosophy, Arthurian legend, English legend, and the witchcraft religions that ride beside that tradition are Gardnerian and Alexandrian, because they partake in the same symbolism and mythology.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question for you.
So I think that's why it's such a nice fit for me. I worked with that group, Servants of the Light, for about 10 years. I did a lot of their study work, took their classes. I'm in good standing with them.
So I've been told by other initiates of different occult orders that they felt like, this was the OTO, though it was somebody who was initiated to the OTO who was also a Gardnerian. And she explained it to where she felt like the OTO was very solar and male, and witchcraft was very lunar and female, but they sort of fit. Do you feel that way about what you were initiated into?
I think SOL was Rosicrucian. It comes out of Dion Fortune through, I guess, her Golden Dawn work in Paris, right? She stayed with Mathers and then branched off of
Is this
Mathers.
Dolores Clay? Or Dolores?
Dion Fortune.
When Mathers was in Paris?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Mathers got a little crazy at the end, so she really separated herself.
Dolores?
She studied under Walter Ernest Butler.
What's her name, though?
Dolores Ashcroft.
Thank you, that's her.
And she's, and
You know, she's friends with Maxine.
she is. They're the same age.
Maxine said, sorry, I've got to tell this story. I try not to do it too much online because I don't want to do it, but I love this story. I shouldn't do it probably. I said, Maxine said she's very vulgar. I said, oh, you don't like her? Oh no, I adored her.
Very powerful.
So they were
Horrible,
yes,
but powerful.
There are very interesting connections between Alexandrian and Gardnerian craft and Servants of the Light.
the Temple of the Mother studied the Brothers of the Adidim tarot,
Yes, they
tarot
did.
stuff
And
at one point.
I think Maxine
I've never
did
done
studied
it.
Yes.
Christian, I'm
But-
aware
and
we sound like
David
we're in a grain
Goddard-
silo.
David Goddard studied.
Levi set this up.
No, he
Christian.
did not. He pointed it out.
As far as the tests, I thought they occurred, but I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt, Elie.
No,
Yes,
this is
but
important. David Goddard studied with the liberal Catholic Church
Mm-hmm.
and with
Yep.
and worked with Maxine Sanders in Temple of the Mother, and was a Servants of the Light devotee for
Yes, he
probably
was.
15 or 20 years.
there's a strong connection between a lot of what came out of that era and our craft. That is true.
It's true. It's all
There's
over
always been a formula within Alexandrian craft that's different than other branches of witchcraft that we are witches and occultists. And to paraphrase my own teacher, we stilled everyone's best bits, didn't we? So yes, the Temple of the Mother was very exploratory in their own area.
Yes.
So yes, they would have explored that and then taken what they wanted and refined it in their coven the way they wanted to use it, just like we do today. Yeah.
And I think they all worked on premises that were English, like the knights, the stories of the knights, the kings, the kingdoms, the systems of
it was very
hierarchy,
Celtic
right?
for a while. So
Celtic studies.
Had its moments.
yeah, it had its moments
King
for sure.
Arthur.
It was massively influential, the Arthurian Grail mythos, and a lot of those
And
things.
England.
The sodality. What was the other? The sodality of the Holy Grail.
William.
The Grail mysteries were very
Bill
important
Gray.
in my
Bill
very
Gray.
Bill
first,
Gray.
first witchcraft groups.
Brotherhood, yeah.
The Grail mysteries and the Celts were extremely important.
We do have a call.
Oh my goodness, who is so brave?
Hi, you're on Covendom. Who's this?
Hello, this is Frank.
Hi, Frank.
Good
how are
evening.
you?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Perfect.
Good
So,
evening.
Good evening, Frank. What was your question?
The what?
What was your question, Frank?
Yes, my question is, you've mentioned already multiple secret societies already, right, that have influenced the craft, Golden Dawn, OTO, the Unfortunates on Secret Society.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it seems that covens that do mention a particular society that has influenced them, they have a different flavor compared to others, right? Like there are covens that are more OTO, they talk about OTO influence. Others, the priesthood talks about, the Unfortunates' work, and they express themselves different. They have a different feel. And I was thinking as you were talking, do you think that somehow the egregores of these secret societies are interconnected with the egregore of the craft and therefore is an influence? It's kind of like tributaries to a main river, right? There is a connection, even though they're their own thing, right? So do you think there's an interconnectedness of their egregores or their power or something else?
So I'm going to briefly say something. When I was writing my book, Initiation to Witchcraft, which you can get on iTunes, one of the main connections I made was looking at how the mystery cults had a lot of cross-pollination in the pre-Christian world, and then mirroring that to occult movements and their cross-pollinizations within this world. There's nothing new under the sun. So when you talk about covens, that depends on whether you mean anything calling itself a coven or a coven within, like, Alexandrian witchcraft. If the coven if the coven's in Alexandrian witchcraft, another tradition should not influence it so much that it starts to become like it. They can certainly work certain things, but the priesthood should retain the tenets of that tradition, in my opinion. And if they have to borrow so much from someone else, it's probably lack of content, training, and substance, in my opinion. But magically speaking, witchcraft is a scavenger religion, and Alexandrians are very greedy for power. So I suppose everyone has their own flavors that they enjoy, right?
I would say, Frank, that it also depends very much on, because witchcraft is a lived religion of people. And so there are going to be some covens that are very ceremonial, like they fall in love with that form of practice. And so they are going to be more influenced by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or by Crowley, right? But there are I have, met initiates who are a little bit more, for a word we don't like, but they feel a little bit more, shall we say, pagan, or if we want to avoid that word, shamanistic. They're more interested in sort of raising power through primal chant to the body and drumming and whatnot. And so they're not going to be as influenced by Mathers and Crowley. So I do think you're right in the sense of there are flavors that can come through in personal practice, but I agree with Brian that what that should not do is challenge, limit, or deconstruct the lived practice of our liturgy or the lived practice of our worship, right? It can influence our magical workings, but
it's okay if it enhances it.
Yes, but it should not detract.
It shouldn't detract, and it depends on the people. Like, we like to say this in New Orleans, a coven is like gumbo. Every time you put something in it, it changes.
Yeah. What about you, Elie?
But if it's gumbo, it's still gumbo.
I think about currents. I think about currents underground. So on the surface, we've got lots of different occult traditions. We already mentioned that we felt like Alexandrian witchcraft came out of the classic English English, Arthurian, Druidry mythology, Celtic mythology, that was a lot of our springs that we bubbled up from. So, so I think that's true in certain patterns, you know, that you're going to see different mythologies and different things coming out in different places.
Okay. And do you think that there's that interconnectedness almost of like the essence of the groups with the priesthood of the craft or the egregore of the craft, kind of like the souls linked together somehow?
I'm going to say yes
right?
to that. I'm going to say yes to that right away. Like, I think you connect, you know, personally, energetically, with like the history, the groups, the priesthood, and then, I mean, you just kind of flow in that pattern. Maybe it's your DNA.
I wouldn't have a problem with saying that's true as well. I think the craft has its own soul.
Yeah.
I think the craft has its own soul, absolutely. A power unto itself, as Maxine says, right? But I do think that it's okay and very common for that to be a part of the larger occult revival. And I think it's impossible to sort of look at it and say it wasn't touched by, you know, all of these things. It was. But it still survived, right? And it still stayed unique. And I think that's important.
Okay.
No good coven can exist in stagnation, which means it changes. It changes a little bit here and there. You know, if they are dedicated to the tradition they're serving, certain things won't change because that would be an individual. For instance, if somebody comes to me looking to be trained in Alexandrian witchcraft, it's my obligation and duty to do my best to train them and pass on that, not that which has been further developed by me, not that which comes from my own personal desires or opinions or those of the coven. However, when you're working in a coven, you know, and everyone's been trained in that original tradition, then you can begin to experiment and trust that everyone knows where they're at. But then somebody's going to hive off, somebody's going to die, a new initiate's going to come in, or new initiates are going to come in, and the process has to start all over again. You know, so it's never quite one note. Witchcraft is witchcraft. So in Alexandrian craft, we say we're witches and occultists because we don't actually combine the two. We don't mix our drinks, even though we experiment a great deal. When I'm drinking rum, I am not drinking wine, because to do so will have terrible consequences.
You can have a terrible headache. Does that answer your question, Frank?
It was an excellent answer, and as I'm listening to y'all, I'm thinking, well, yeah, true, of course. Even the Freemasons and other societies, secret societies, they're not going to be mixing their drinks because they kind of are going to lose themselves, right? If they continue to mix up and mix up and mix up, right? We don't want that. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Yes. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you for calling.
Yes. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. So I'll say this. I wanted to like take one more thing with what he said, which is what Brian's talking about. I am going to move the mics a little closer because we are the way.
What we're all talking about.
I know we're very echoey.
Sorry.
There is, yes, influences, absolutely, right? You know, there is absolutely influences from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, from all kinds of different organizations. However, whenever I approach something from a specific tradition or organization, like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is usually the exemplar that we always use, right? I'm not just saying, okay, now I'm going to step into Golden Dawn mode. No, what's happening is I'm saying I'm going to approach this through the lens of witchcraft. So anytime I approach Hermetic magic, Arthurian legends, I don't really approach Crowley a lot, to be honest, anymore. But like, if I was going to approach any of that, I'm not approaching it by stepping away from craft. I am approaching it through the lens of craft. So it's coming into me.
You know, in the same way with the teachings that we do in the New Orleans Coven, when we do step a bit outside of craft and we study Kabbalah or some other system, we still bring that back to craft, you know, because it's not our pursuit to say, this is now Golden Dawn week, we're going to be like the Golden Dawn.
Like,
we're not doing that.
Listen to what my vision for this is, though, in taking everything through the lens of our craft. So, Goetia, we could just draw the triangle outside our circle and still invoke the spirits and practice all the grimoire magic.
What?
We're just saying that we could bring these through our craft.
Well,
All the
yeah,
different
I mean, you
styles.
could take...
I'm sorry, I misheard
Yes,
you.
yes.
All the different
She's
styles.
just giving an example.
We could,
Yeah.
and then what else could we do? Healing magics. We could
Yeah,
try.
angelics.
Angelics. We could do the same there. All the healing styles we could bring through practicing on different patients.
You could bring through
So
any
I
of
like
that.
the-
It's experimentation, you know, and the truth of the matter is, and I think we all three agree, craft is enough for us. We could get everything we wanted just from craft.
I
But
think we could do everything.
we're greedy
ever
for
wanted to
power, so we are always trying to see, can we finesse ourselves? Can we challenge ourselves? So when we do go with wafting into these other forms of magic, it's almost to challenge ourselves to say, could we do better? And almost infallibly the answer is no and yes.
Yeah.
But you
It's
know what
both.
else I think? That's why that information would be secret society. Whatever we discovered
Yeah.
through practicing certain kinds of magic through our witchcraft lens, the results I think would be secret society.
For those of you who
We
want to be
wouldn't talk
technical
about it.
advisors,
We wouldn't
there's
talk
not much we can do about it in the middle of the show.
We wouldn't talk about it.
We're live, so it is what it is. The show will either be redone, connected again, or we might. One time we
What's our
had to. Well, it's the way these are set up, which they were before. When I
Yeah,
went,
they're very hard to move
when I
because
went
of where they are.
back and listened to it last, there were complaints that we were all too quiet. So they set this up so we'd be loud, and so now it echoes. We weren't too quiet before because everyone kept saying they couldn't hear Elie. But when I went back and watched the show, I could hear her on all the things just fine. So
I'm going to work on projecting.
Project.
how it's set up now, it is a little echoey. Sorry about that, but we're in the middle of a show, so unless you want us to turn it off and set it up, we can't really do much about it.
We don't know. We don't really
So
know what
it
to
is what
do.
it is. But thank you for the feedback. Next time we'll try to get somebody to
I
do
do
it.
like how we bring all magical experimentation through our witchcraft circle. We
Yes. And that's what the secret society
We
part
don't
is
build
about.
something else to do it.
No.
We build our system and we bring it through our system and maybe set it up within our system and practice it and then take it out of our system. I think that's really cool.
Because that's the whole point. Is like once you
Well, I
have the
love it,
family,
you know,
right? You're allowed to approach almost
I'd
anything.
be fine
And
just
we can experiment with anything.
I could do all my magic just from the Book of Shadows. I think
Yes.
the Book of Shadows is the most magical book on the planet. I could do all my craft just from that. I don't need any of these other things, but like I say, I'm greedy for power. So I want to delve and challenge myself, and it has helped develop me magically and in other initiatory ways. You know, one of the things about Gerald Gardner was that he was on the path of initiation, you know. He was initiated into all of these things.
Yeah.
And although I hate to say I'm going to speculate on what he thought, I think he believed that all of these things had pre-Christian roots.
Yeah.
And so therefore I think he thought they were probably lost knowledge that was applicable to his religion of witchcraft. And he said that what he inherited from the New Force Coven had fragmented rituals, which I'm not going to explain what I think those might be, but he definitely enhanced. He'd been in other rituals. He'd been in Druid rituals. He'd been in Masonic rituals. He'd been in theaters. Like he'd seen really great rituals.
Malaysia,
Yes,
Indonesia.
absolutely.
He'd seen all kinds of other ethnic
So he did his
rituals.
best to give us options, and I have to say those options work really well. I think the craft has benefited on everything that he did. But I think people would be mistaken to think that he just made a quilt. You know, to sort of pull the wool over people's eyes. I don't think it was that at all. I think witchcraft is and was and still is a scavenger religion, and I think that, I think witchcraft is a mystery cult, like the cult of Isis, like the cult of Dionysus, like the cult of Eleusis, and like secret groves of druids, perhaps, in Celtic society. We don't really know, but the point of it is that the idea of it is that these things all had an inner link too. If you look at the cult of Alexandria, it connected with the cult of Eleusis and the cult of Dionysus, and that probably had connections to other cults. Well, we know it did with the cult of Mithra. They were all cross initiations and cross things, and that's what you can find in the occult. If you look at who formed the Golden Dawn, who formed the OTO, the roots of the OTO, their connections with Masonry, the modern Druid orders, all of them, all of the original ones.
Rosicrucians.
They're all connected. Rosicrucians, they're all from initiates from different occult orders that came together with a new idea.
And there's also more than people realize.
But still, Egyptian,
Oh, of course,
Egyptian, Greek, and Roman, and Celtic. I mean,
Yes.
it all still came out of
It
that
was
same
European
base.
interests.
Yeah.
Everyone ignored Germany because of Hitler. So,
Although they do have the
But
Fraternitas
but
Fraterni.
Until World War
Excuse
II,
me.
until World War I mean, Germany still wasn't even Germany back then. It was Prussia
no, they
and
did.
Hanover.
There were German occult societies, but
The Brotherhood of Saturn, it's a huge one.
yes, but the
Historically.
British, when most of this became a hub in Britain, they ignored everything Germanic and Norse because of that.
Oh yes, it would be very.
I mean, Hitler literally was creating a Nordic religion, Aryan religion, like that was in the ethos of what he
And
was
still
doing.
it is taboo.
Yeah.
When we look at the Aryan.
It is a little taboo.
It's
white
also
supremacist people.
Brian's right about one thing: is a lot of people don't realize that, but it became very taboo in British society after World War II.
They were bombed by
to
them.
like anything German.
Yes.
German food, German music, anything culturally Germanic was very.
Which I have to say, I'm a big fan of sauerkraut and those pretzels, though I don't know if pretzels
I
are
love
really
German
German.
food.
Sauerkraut.
I love German food. Schnitzel, so good.
So, and the British certainly have Germanic roots, but yes, they had to ignore it, just like they ignore their Roman roots.
Yeah, we just had to pretend everything was Celtic.
Everything
there
was
never like anything Norse. Like it's a
No
bit,
Germans, no Norse, no Romans, just Celtic.
just Celtic. It's all King Arthur, which was French, but whatever.
Tell us,
A lot of the legends were. Right?
Yes, they were.
tell us some societies that are public compared to our societies that are secret.
Well, I think
What do you
all
mean?
societies are
Like,
secret
give
in
me
the
a
occult.
counterbalance to that. Like the Ronald McDonald House Society is like a pro-children who are ill fundraising.
Correct.
What does that have to do with this?
They're just like so they're not a secret society. They're a public society.
Well, I mean, unless they're embezzling money, I don't know.
Maybe they
I
are.
want to see the
They're
other
not.
side of the
They're not.
coin.
Maybe
What's the
it's
other
like
side of
a.
the coin?
The other
God,
side
I'm
of
going
the
to say
coin.
horrible things.
The other side of the coin,
Like straight
Elie,
up
is
Christianity or
No.
other religions.
One must
like,
wonder what a clown wants with children.
no, Elie. I think what you're asking is the sort of counterbalance to secret occult societies. I would say would be public, non-denominational, non-doctrinal, unorganized. Sort of like we talked about earlier, like organizations of people who just come together and say we kind of are all sort of pagan, but it doesn't matter what you believe and it doesn't matter who you are, right? Like
Well,
they
I'd
don't
say
have the same purpose.
Well, they all do. I mean, sorry, not you. I was trying to think of that. That Irish lady, the Fellowship of Isis.
Lady,
Her society,
Blank.
I mean, I don't know if that's considered
Her
secret,
brother.
but it probably was. There are probably
why
things
am I
they did.
blanking on her name?
I can't think of
Lady
it.
Olivia,
Yes.
Olivia Robertson.
Robertson. That's
Is it
exactly
Olivia
right.
Robertson?
Yes.
I mean, there are orders like that that weren't as secret, but I'm sure they did stuff in them that
They have their own initiations
Yeah.
and stuff, though. I mean, they're not
I
as
don't know if
secretive.
they're secretive, but yeah.
They're not secretive, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a part of their ethos.
I
To my
think they
knowledge.
are.
But no,
They might be,
their
I
rituals
don't
are public. I think.
Some of them,
Yeah.
or maybe all of them. I don't know.
I think they have an ethos of being public.
I
But
will say that lady lived. Anyone who dedicates themselves to Isis is beautiful and lives a really long time, if they were beautiful to begin with.
But it's also about
That was the
joining.
point.
That's something we're not talking about. Is a lot of these organizations are the difference between visiting the church and joining the church, right? So a lot of secret societies are when you decided, okay, I want to join this, like I want to do something with it, as opposed to like I kind of went to some of the meetings, but I don't really want to do anything with it. You know what I mean?
But for us, like our initiations, there's no way around
I think I have an
Yeah.
answer to your question in a roundabout way, though. Some groups in and outside of witchcraft have public platforms that they officially use. Like the OTO will have their open masses,
Yep, they have the Gnostic.
and some initiatory craft has what we call outer court groups. I don't know if the Rosicrucians have anything. The Masons have outreach
some
stuff.
groups
You know,
must have
they don't do
that.
rituals, but they go on parades and ride around with their little hats and
Yes,
donate money
yeah.
and stuff like that.
Shriners.
My way of doing it is, just the public rituals we do, things like Covendom, public education, things like that. So I think the three of us operate more like Masons do. Our outer court is just being in the world.
Yeah.
And saying we're initiates and this is what we can tell you about it and we're willing to answer your questions and we're all very beautiful. and intelligence.
Are you just having a moment with yourself, Brian, tonight?
No, me and Elie are having a moment. We have lots
it's a beautiful
of moments
moment.
together.
God bless
We
them.
do. We're very beautiful.
Right.
Levi's okay too.
Hit or miss, really.
What you make up for in intelligence, you get with those eyes.
I'll do it.
Yes,
All true.
Levi has the prettiest eyes out of all of them. I'm very jealous. You can't see them with
You
the
can't see them
glasses.
close. They're very
My eyes
green.
look very beautiful because I have makeup on.
He has the pretty.
Levi doesn't
Levi's
have to
got
have
the
makeup.
diva eyes, though. Levi's got the diva
I do.
Christian and Levi have that natural mascara.
Eyelashes too. They
Makes
do.
me so mad.
I do have long eyelashes. I have very long eyelashes.
You just have to try.
All right, what's our last final messages?
What's your last final message? Well, first of all, let's leave room real quick for questions. So we're running out of time for the show. So we've got technically 20 minutes or so. So if you have any questions, now's the time. If anyone else wants to call in besides Frank, who is our most interesting person tonight.
I like Frank.
Because
We
he
like
called
Frank.
in. I like to
Good job, Frank.
Frank, good job. Very brave. And then if we don't get any calls, we'll all just sort of give a closing, starting with Madame Orientis Elie
That's right. I'm going to go ahead and give
Barnes.
Sorer
Madame Orientis Elie Barnes.
my closing statement is
Dame, Madam. No, Dame.
You just keep adding.
Dame Oriental. Oh, sorry, I had to get the name right.
is that I think internal work is secret work, and that I think if you sort of begin to make a commitment to some spiritual growth and work for yourself, and even if you just keep a little journal about some ideas and some dreams and maybe some flashes of insight from spirit, that you'll be led into your own secret path for you, and that as you do that work and you come out of it, you'll find other people who are doing it, and you'll find some groups and make friends and grow in great ways. But I'm a huge believer in the secret path, wherever you find it.
The mysteries.
The mysteries. Internal and external. It is.
309.
He's like, please, God, anyone but this.
I'm happy when we get one call,
Hey, we
but
did
it's
well
better
tonight.
when we get lots of them.
We did very well considering all of the tech things.
We don't know what this looks like on the other end.
We don't.
It might be like screaming in a Coke can with like
Yeah, it's just me
electric-
screaming in a Diet Coke can and everything just sounds terrible.
What do you think, Levi, about the secret societies?
I have used an analogy throughout my time on Covendom, and I think it is my favorite analogy. I use it with my students in my coven. I use it all the time to talk about religion. And it's an analogy people flinch at because it's almost cliche, and it's the analogy of love, right? And I have to continuously go back to it as my analogy because it's the closest thing I have to my experience as an initiate, right? It is what it feels like sometimes when you have an experience of the divine, when you have an experience of the goddess, it does feel like that. And I have to ask people who've experienced love in a more romantic sense. I ask you, do you not have those moments with your partner where it's a shared glance, it's a secret thing, you both know what you're talking about, the necessity of words starts to diminish. There is something that is built through continual practice and through closed practice. Something that you aren't just winging every time you do it, something that you didn't just make up on the fly, but something that is continuously touched upon, loved, created, recreated, constantly used. It builds this immense power. Memorized. It builds this immense power. And I'm not willing to forfeit that. And if that means that elitism is going to be a part of it, or it means that I'm in a closed practice, if it means that I'm going to have less people in my religion, I am still willing to make those sacrifices to have what I have as an initiate. What I'm not willing to do is get rid of it.
How quaint. Even the rabble.
Sorry, it seemed fitting.
It did.
I guess my last closing things is, just sort of connecting to my emotions about this, which is very odd for me to do.
He has feelings sometimes.
I have a feeling. And my feeling tonight is about the fact that I think that there is something sacred about the secret. The word sacred and secret are connected. And I think that this is an old world knowledge. I think it predates what we call craft. I think it predates a lot of things. And, there is the witchcraft that's older than witchcraft. There is the witchcraft that's older than the word witch. Witchcraft predates witchcraft. And we know this. But it's always been initiatory. And I just love the intimacy of working in a coven, and I always have. And there's just a wonderful intimacy when you have a small group of people of like mind. I think that's when the burning bush speaks.
Train to connect.
Yes.
Train to connect.
And what's wonderful about it is the burning bush could speak to you on the hillside, but when you come down rambling to the people, you're going to have to throw your stone tablets because no one's going to believe you, right? You're going to have to throw a fit. And they're not going to expect to believe you. I think that story of Moses, it's really metaphorical that he had to throw the stone tablets because, of course, they're not going to believe you. They weren't there. But when you're in a coven, you are with people of a like mind, and no one's going to really fall for your delusion. What they do, however, is embrace that common feeling. When the powers that would be are invoked and they come through, and everyone has that same similar miracle occur, it's very nice to... Yes, you get that confirmation.
Yeah.
And it keeps you on the straight and narrow in a sense, but I love the intimacy of it. I'm a very private person about my worship. I'm a very private person about my emotions. I'm a very private person about everything. So, most people wouldn't really understand this, but I'm an introvert who's very good at pretending to be an extrovert.
I believe that about you.
But I'm really
100%.
an introvert. I'm just like, why are you talking to me right now? Can't you be like Elie? We just think together. We don't have to talk so much.
A lot of us actually in our group are introverts. And that's why when we pour ourselves into the center, because we agree to work together.
Yes.
Something magical happens.
That's an extroverted
We all looked
event.
each other out. And Elie didn't just come running to my coven. She looked, and we looked back, and same with him and us, and we all decided... And that's what a coven does. You decide that these are the people that you want to have that intimate experience. I think the beautiful thing about craft in some older groups is 3 to 13 people. There's never more than you and 12 other people. And usually there's not that many. Usually it's most covens are around 8 people, But, the most they can be is 13. And it just creates this intimacy.
It's beautiful.
And I think religion was meant to be intimate. So... I enjoy it. I would never want to be in a mega religion. That's why when you hear me say, I don't want to be in a big group like that.
With the one speaker and 1,000 people sitting in rows, I don't think so. I think it really lost itself when it went away from that small actors guild, right? When the group came together to work the rituals and tell the story mythologically and share whatever bread or wine.
Christianity used to kind of be like that.
They did, and then they started becoming more and more grandiose.
There's a beauty to it. Absolutely.
Witchcraft didn't
But I mean,
do that.
that's my preference.
Witchcraft didn't do that. It said we're going to stay small.
Do I understand why people want us to have this sort of strong connection? I don't know. Ask yourself this: what would that really achieve?
I think the
We've got this. We can talk about it right now legally. We can converse. We can share ideas. We can alert each other of problems. That's great that we live in a time where we can do that again, which we weren't able to do for thousands of years. But, unless we have armies at our disposal or hundreds of millions of dollars to pay for lawyers, it doesn't matter how much you're bitching on Instagram and Facebook about anything. That's not how the world works. So our religion doesn't have that sort of like Vatican-like thing. And although I understand the power behind that, there's a cost for that kind of power. And I just really don't want it in my personal religious space. I prefer the intimacy. And if I've got a problem with the world, I'm going to go to the world with it myself. And if my coven wants to do it too, they're absolutely, willing to join me. If other witches want to talk about it and do it too, great. That's all wonderful. But unfortunately, we're not this one thing. And 90% of people who call themselves witches are not talking about what we're talking about. So it's hard to have that conversation. Oh yes, we should all go do this political protest. Raise the protest for the protest, not because you're a witch. Why would you want to limit the people fighting to be witches? If somebody's being racist or if somebody's persecuting women, or if somebody's doing these things, you want everyone you can to get behind you. So trying to cloister ourselves as some sort of religious movement that's going to be political, I don't think it really serves a purpose. I think be a witch that says we don't believe that, we do believe this. We believe in women's rights, we believe in freedom. I think that's great, but we don't need a political witchcraft movement. If I'm ever persecuted for my religious beliefs and I don't have money for a lawyer, I'm not going to witches. I'm going to the Jews.
Wow.
Well, they have that. I can't think of the name of the organization that's human rights.
The Anti-Defamation?
We don't have to overlap them.
ACLU, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, the ACLU.
Yes, it's created by the Jews.
We don't have to overlap them. We don't have to overlap them.
No, you can fight. You can fight injustice without making it a religious movement.
My feeling was that everybody individually, whatever your religious style was, take your big ideas, the things you'd like to see in the world, take them to your ritual space and push them out religiously.
But you can
by
speak
yourself,
on it too.
in a group, or whatever. Even this 4 minutes a day, you're putting your effort out towards what you believe and what you want to do. And I think witches do it more often.
Absolutely.
Together and alone every day.
I can absolutely tell you on here, and I
do
don't mind doing it. I'm pro-choice, but I don't think I need to make a religious movement out of that. I think most witches are pro-choice.
I would demand it actually in my circle, but if somebody
get out.
I will say I do want to make one caveat. There is a difference between political and moral.
Yes.
So you're not coming my circle if you're a flagrant racist, right? That's not happening, right? Because that's not love, right?
But there probably are circles that wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem in mine. So I do think there's a difference between, I don't care what your tax policies are, well, I do probably, but it's not going to be a barrier to your experiencing the society. But I absolutely have a problem if you're a misogynist or a racist.
And we're going to know. We're going to look at people that
There's
seriously.
a big difference. But I think what Brian is speaking to is something I believe very strongly, which is I do not want my religious experience to cease to be a religious experience.
Absolutely.
That's what Brian is.
I'm not going to go to the Covendom and be like, hey everyone, who are you voting for?
No, I want certain things to remain sacred. This is the reason.
If I would have smelled a Trumpy, they probably would have disappeared in the woods.
Yes.
But I wasn't going to ask.
But I think Elie spoke to that too, is that there is that spiritual connection that's built in small religious spaces that are very intense and very mystical that I wouldn't want to lose.
And our structure is that every ritual, certain elements are achieved that bring in the power structure, right?
Yeah.
Every time, the same thing.
And that's what we've been talking about this whole night with the concept of witchcraft as a secret society.
Safe. That's what's sacred. That's what's private.
It is
that's
set apart.
And then within that structure, whatever has to be worked on gets brought in, worked on, and built.
Set apart, sacred, right? Secret. We keep it secret. We keep it safe. Right. And I think we all are really grateful for that.
But we're also always open to hear what some problem would be.
Sure.
Say, can we help you or not, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, we could
not
go.
Judgmental.
We could do an entire show about the pitfalls of that too. You're much more likely to have abuse in a secret society, et cetera, et cetera. There are pitfalls on every side, but what we're talking about is
sometimes the abuse is good.
But we're talking. Sometimes it's never. But we're talking about the sort of beauty of what it means to be in these circles.
I don't know. Elie's abuse is good.
What is our next show?
We didn't actually decide.
I thought we did.
No, we don't have a plan. Unless you can remember something I don't remember.
I thought you told me.
No,
you didn't.
I think you're thinking about this show.
We have no idea.
Yeah. So
we'll come on in 2 or 3 days.
We're open to any ideas. We're going to be doing it next week, right? So we'll come up with something. I think we've got old ideas we can go look at. We might have one I just have not remembered. But we'll end the show with saying in the Alexandrian tradition we have no secrets. We have mysteries.
We only have mysteries.
And we'll answer any question, but we won't tell you what we don't want you to know. Because some things are just none of your business. Even if you think they should be.
Some of it is just too beautiful, right?
Yes.
So, on that note, we're going to say thank you for joining us tonight.
Until next week.
Until next time, stay safe, stay wonderful. Stay within the mysteries if you can.
And may the goddess of the entire universe bless you, yours, me, and mine.
Let us hope. Good night.